in Mago Reddit. Today's story is...
My family replaced me with my missing brother after 7 years of sacrifices. They never imagined what would happen 5 weeks later when he revealed his true plan. At 25, I have always been tied to family responsibility. When my 30-year-old brother left home without explanation, the whole burden fell on me. My university aspirations, my independence, everything was put on hold. I convinced myself that it was necessary to support my fragile parents after my brother's sudden departure. Last Christmas was different. Without feeling particularly excited, I was hoping to receive some recognition. For the first time in a long time, we would all be together. Me, my parents, some relatives, and surprisingly, my absent brother. After 7 years of practically no communication, he had returned. My parents were over the moon, talking exclusively about him in the days leading up to the celebration. I wanted to bake a cake as a small gesture for my family, even though I felt more like a caregiver than a daughter. However, my mother, brimming with joy, wouldn't even let me use the kitchen. The aromas of cinnamon and roast turkey filled the house. For a moment, I thought this holiday would be different, that maybe I wouldn't end up discreetly sobbing in some corner. The meal began without complications, with all the traditional dishes being served. My parents were brimming with happiness, commenting on how our family was finally complete again. With the return of my brother, I listened silently as I pecked at my mashed potatoes while they painted a heroic picture of him. He was late. Then came his grand entrance. He strode in with the confidence of absolute ownership, sporting an expensive coat and a smug smile that immediately irritated me. My parents rushed to greet him as if he were a celebrity. He dropped his designer bag in the hallway and spread his arms, announcing his return and his intention to stay indefinitely. His announcement left me perplexed. I looked towards my parents, expecting at least a glance in my direction, some acknowledgement of how this might affect me after so many years of looking after them. Instead, they smiled at him as if he were the divine reincarnation. My mother clasped her hands together, expressing how wonderful it would be to have her capable son back home again. Capable. That word resonated like a slap in the face. Where had he been all this time? When there were unpaid bills, during my father's operation, when my mother broke her ankle, while I was juggling 3 part-time jobs, he was completely absent. I tried to contain my growing anger by concentrating on the food, but then my father intervened, suggesting that perhaps it was time for me to leave. After all, now that my brother had returned, it was no longer necessary. The humiliation was immediate and cutting. My fork fell onto my plate as I stared at them in disbelief. They continued as if they had rehearsed it, saying that I was the independent one, the black sheep who never really fitted in. My brother leaned back laughing, assuring me that the house would be well taken care of. I felt tears threatening to well up, but I refused to show them. Not there. Not in front of them. I apologized, mumbling something about needing some fresh air, and I went out into the cold night. The stars blurred as I took in what had happened. 7 years. 7 years sacrificing everything, constantly prioritizing them. And this was my thanks. Dismissed as insignificant, replaced by someone who abandoned them without a second thought. My chest ached with a mixture of sadness and anger. For the first time, I allowed myself to question, what was the point of all my sacrifices? I couldn't find an answer. But as I shivered in the cold, something became painfully clear. I couldn't stay there. Something needed to change, although I still didn't know what exactly. I stayed outside longer than planned, repeatedly walking up and down the icy path as I tried to regain my composure. The shame of being so easily discarded by those I had sacrificed everything for made my blood boil. I had always known about my parents' preference for my brother. It had been evident since our childhood, but this, asking me to leave now that he had returned, felt like the ultimate betrayal. I didn't want to go back inside, but I couldn't leave either. My car was parked there, and I didn't want to make a dramatic exit that would only give my brother more reason to gloat. So I stood there, staring at the warm glow of the fireplace, wondering how everything had gone so wrong. Shortly afterwards, I heard the front door open behind me. I tensed, expecting one of my parents to come out and give me another patronizing lecture about how I should be happy for my brother. Instead, It was my uncle. He had also been at the dinner, sitting quietly at the end of the table, saying little as the drama unfolded. My father's older brother was always more of an observer than a participant in family matters. But he had a perspicacity that I have always respected. He approached me slowly. Without saying a word, he took off his coat and placed it on my shoulders. I hadn't realized how intensely I was trembling until that moment. He said he knew it wasn't his place to intervene, but he couldn't leave me alone after what had happened. His voice was calm and firm, although with a nuance that suggested more anger than he was showing. He told me that it wasn't right. He had seen how I sacrificed everything for my parents for years, only to be cast aside when my brother reappeared. It wasn't fair, he said, and I deserved better. Hearing someone acknowledge my situation caused a lump to form in my throat. I wanted to cry my eyes out. I hadn't realized how much I needed someone to see me, to validate the years of effort and pain endured. My uncle continued, mentioning that he had noticed this pattern in my parents long before. He had tried to intervene during our childhood, but my parents always ignored him. He confessed that he regretted not having done more then, but now he wanted to help. I looked at him skeptically. Help? How? What could I do to fix this mess? Then he reached into his pocket and pulled out a small card. He told me about an opportunity he was working on, a business project he had recently started with some partners. He said they were looking for someone reliable, hardworking, and intelligent to manage operations. He thought I would be perfect for the job. I examined the card while my mind raced. It seemed like a lifeline thrown to someone drowning, but simultaneously doubt arose. What if I wasn't ready? What if I failed? I had spent so many years surviving, taking care of my parents, and working in various jobs that I didn't even know my abilities. He must have noticed my hesitation because he asked me to think about it, without pressure, but making it clear that he believed in me, even though no one else seemed to. He said it was time for me to live for myself instead of for others. We stayed outside for a while longer, talking discreetly about the past and the guilt associated with even considering moving away from my parents. He listened without judging, offering only encouragement and reassurance. When we finally went back inside, my parents and my brother were still sitting in the dining room, laughing as if nothing had happened, hardly noticing my absence. Was I stupid to stay with them for so long? Update 1. 2 days after Christmas, I was still feeling the pain caused by my parents' words. Black sheep, now unnecessary. Their voices echoed in my mind as a cruel reminder of my insignificance to them. The idea of continuing to live in that house under the same roof as my brother and my parents was unbearable. I had given up everything for them for years, yet they made it clear that I was expendable. By the time the house began to stir, I had already made my decision. It was impossible to stay there another day. After a quick shower, I started to gather my belongings. It didn't take long. I didn't own much apart from clothes and a few personal items. I realized that this was evidence of how much I had sacrificed. While my brother had the latest gadgets, expensive clothes, and a room full of luxuries, my life fit perfectly into 2 bags. Throughout all these years, they had kept his room intact, but impeccably clean. As I closed the last bag, my uncle knocked on the door. He must have noticed my gloomy expression because he spoke softly, asking if I had a minute to talk. Some relatives were still staying there, including him. He handed me a cup of coffee and asked about my plans. I answered honestly. I planned to leave and maybe stay temporarily with a friend. He nodded thoughtfully as if anticipating this answer. I didn't have enough money to find my own place right away. The prospect of returning to my low-paying job while figuring out my next steps was daunting. Then he surprised me. He suggested that I move in with him. He lived about an hour away and had a guest room where I could stay for as long as I needed. He told me it was time to put myself first and wanted to help me get settled. I hesitated, unsure about accepting such generosity, but then he said something that struck me. You've spent too much time taking care of everyone. Let someone take care of you for once. With tears in my eyes, I took a deep breath and nodded. He was right. By midday, I had loaded my luggage into his car and had said a brief goodbye to my parents. My mother barely looked up from the table, completely focused on attending to my brother. My father didn't even hide his disinterest. Neither of them asked where I was going or when I would be back. It was as if I had already been erased from their lives. The trip to my uncle's house was quiet but comforting. He didn't pressure me to talk, giving me space to process everything. When we arrived, he helped me with my luggage and showed me to my room. It was small but cozy, with clean sheets and a window overlooking a quiet backyard. I felt like I could breathe. I realized that this could really lead to something positive. Update 2. Staying with my uncle was strange at first. It wasn't just the change of environment. It was the absence of tension. No passive-aggressive comments, no constant pressure to meet impossible expectations, and no one reminding me of my supposed shortcomings. I didn't walk cautiously around my uncle, and he didn't treat me like a burden. Instead, he treated me as if I mattered, something I wasn't used to. The first few days went by quickly. My uncle worked from home. His company operated from another city. He gave me space to settle in and consider my next steps. I evaluated his offer. I spent most of my time trying to help him as much as I could and trying to figure out how to deal with the huge void that my parents' rejection had created in my life. One night, as we sat in the living room with cups of tea, he broke the silence with a significant question. He asked me what my plan was for moving forward. I admitted that I was considering his proposal. It was strange to think about my own needs, much less to prioritize them. He went on to say that he had observed how I managed everything at home, from budgets to schedules, and knew that I had the necessary qualities for this business. Initially, I was hesitant to accept his offer. It sounded too good to be true, and I was afraid of failing or disappointing him, but he quickly reassured me. He said that he wasn't just offering me an opportunity, he wanted me to create an experience for myself. He promised to guide me through the process, but made it clear that this was my opportunity and asked me not to let him down. The idea began to grow on me. I reflected on all the years of sacrificing myself for others and how little I had to show for it. This could be my chance to finally pursue something of my own, even if it was in another city. I told him I accepted. The relief on his face was evident. Update 3. The first weeks in the new city seemed to belong to a different life. It wasn't easy, but there was something liberating about starting over. My uncle showed great patience as I adapted to the rhythm of his business. He gave me real responsibilities from the start. He wasn't playing games. He settled me into his office, saying it was mine until I found my own space. The work was challenging, but I immersed myself completely. I needed to show that I could handle it. He always said I had untapped potential, and gradually I began to believe it too. The mornings were full of meetings and planning, while the afternoons brought a peace that had been unknown for years. No shouting, no additional pressure, it was a real relief. One night, after finishing the day, my uncle poured us a drink and shared his own story. He had struggled in his early days, balancing work and personal obligations while discovering his identity. I was surprised to realize that I was not as alone as I thought. He told me that he saw in me the same fire he once had. That simple comment reactivated something I thought was long extinguished. I enrolled in an online certification program to complement my new role, balancing work and studies for the first time in a long time. It wasn't easy, but I thrived on the challenge. The suffocating feeling of being trapped was gone. Every day offered something new to learn, and with each small achievement, my confidence grew. One night, sitting in my apartment, surrounded by notes and spreadsheets, I looked around and reflected on my progress. For years, I was trapped in a cycle of constantly giving. A simple thank you would have been enough, but it never came. I gave up my dreams and ambitions to keep my family together, only to be cast aside when they considered me no longer necessary. I would be lying if I said that I did not still feel the pain of that betrayal. Sometimes it would hit me unexpectedly, seeing families together in cafes or hearing colleagues talk about parents who supported them, but then I would remind myself that I wasn't doing this for anyone else. This was my life, and it was finally my turn to live it on my terms. At home, things were not turning out as my parents had imagined. My brother, whom they had so eagerly welcomed, was showing his true colors. Initially, they were small but significant details. He would promise to help with the bills but then forget to pay his share. Or he would leave his things scattered everywhere. hoping that my parents would pick up after him. I had witnessed it before and knew it wouldn't end well, but this time it wasn't me who was cleaning up after him. It was my parents who now understood the situation they had got themselves into. The critical point came when the bills started to pile up faster than they could be paid. My brother had no qualms about spending money on gadgets and things for his entertainment while my parents were struggling financially. They were trapped with him, and he was leaving them with no resources. It wasn't long before they realized their mistake, although they obviously didn't want to admit it. I knew from family rumors that they were beginning to regret their behavior towards me, especially as they saw their situation deteriorating. My brother, the one they considered their savior, was too busy satisfying himself. Meanwhile, my life was progressing in an unthinkable way. The news of my success reached them indirectly, probably through those relatives who never avoid sharing details. I didn't know their feelings about it, but I really didn't care anymore. They chose to cast me aside for someone without commitment, and now they were facing the consequences of their decisions. Update 4. The voice message came out of the blue. It was my mother, and something in her tone sounded different, more vulnerable, almost desperate. She said we needed to talk, that they were sorry for what had happened. It was unbelievable. After all, did they simply expect me to return to their lives as if nothing had changed? I tried to push the thought away, but it persisted in my mind. I needed answers. I wanted to hear them acknowledge their mistake. I called my uncle. He showed no surprise, as if he had anticipated this. He advised me, "Don't let them make you feel guilty into going back. Not after all your effort. You have earned your peace of mind." He was right. But against my better judgment, I went. I didn't know what I was going to face. Upon entering the house, it seemed unchanged. Same furniture, same mess. My parents were sitting at the table, their faces dejected. Their lack of rest was evident. For a moment, I wondered if they really regretted their actions. But then I sensed the tension. I realized that this was not simply an apology. They thought a sorry would fix everything. Dad spoke first, his voice hoarse, as if unused for days. He expressed his regret, acknowledging his big mistake and pushing me aside for my brother. I stood motionless for a moment, processing his words. After everything that had happened, it sounded empty. I couldn't hold back any longer. I told them how much they had hurt me, how they had dismissed my efforts for them. I said they were wrong to expel me and treat me like the problem. Unable to contain my growing anger, I simply let it out. I reminded them that I kept everything running while they focused on the son who abandoned them when they needed him most. It was unbelievable that they really thought everything would be fine, simply because he decided to return. Both of them seemed stunned by my words, but it was Mom who finally responded. She said she hadn't realized how much I had distanced myself, that they just wanted to restore normality with my brother back home again. She almost seemed to be begging for forgiveness. For a moment I felt some compassion, but then the indignation returned intensely. It was unheard of. I said, "Do you really think that everything would magically improve with his return? Do you think I will forget years of being the only one responsible for everything? I gave up everything for you." It was harsh and deliberate, but I didn't care. The truth needed to be expressed. My father shifted uncomfortably, his face red, probably realizing the gravity of the situation. He didn't know what to say. Mom just looked at me, her eyes moist. But I felt no pity for her, not this time, not after treating me as if I were invisible for so long. I stood up then and declared, "I moved on. I built my own life. They can't just offer an 'I'm sorry' and expect me to pretend nothing matters." It was as if the room froze. Mom looked like she was about to speak, but the words never emerged. Dad remained seated, his face wrinkling. I understood then that this apology would be insufficient. It wouldn't get the desired resolution. I left that house without looking back. Update 5. A week had passed since our meeting. I didn't get the resolution I was hoping for, but it was enough. I had regained my peace and my life, something I never really thought possible. Things were progressing favorably, and no, my uncle was not angry with me. I informed him about my visit. He even gave me the keys to his property there. I was beginning to think that maybe my brother's return was my salvation. And then the phone rang, speaking of the devil. It was my mother's number. I didn't answer. I couldn't, not yet. I had to keep moving forward without letting them drag me back into the chaos they had created. But the phone kept ringing insistently. Finally, after the fourth call, I answered. I didn't anticipate what would follow. It was my father. His voice was unrecognizable compared to the man I had left behind. This voice was completely different. He sounded devastated, as if he had been robbed of his last breath. He said we needed to talk again, that circumstances had changed since I left. There was an urgency in his voice that was impossible to ignore, although I still had my doubts. I was prepared for any eventuality. He began by saying that he understood my reluctance, but the situation had worsened. They didn't know who else to turn to. They needed my help. He expressed his deep regret. He admitted to having made a serious mistake. He said that they should never have pushed me aside, that they had taken me for granted. He informed me that my brother had left again, this time for good. He had collected his belongings and simply disappeared, leaving them more than empty. Apparently, he was hiding at home after accumulating debts and leaving them with unresolvable financial and legal problems. They were desperate. The reality hit me hard. This was the brother praised for years, considered capable, successful. And now he was gone, leaving them with nothing but problems. Dad went on, his voice breaking. He said they had counted on my brother to take care of everything, but now everything was collapsing. He couldn't express it enough. They had been wrong. They had sent me away thinking it was preferable, but now they recognized they needed me. Initially, I was stunned, speechless. How could I respond to this? Was it genuine regret or simply desperation to get me back? It was unclear, but I had no desire to return to that chaos. I was quite satisfied with my current life. Finally, I spoke, trying to contain my resentment. I asked, "Are you asking me for money? After all this?" There was a momentary silence. I could almost hear them searching for the right words. Dad spoke again, his tone calmer, more humble this time. He said they didn't know what else to do. They couldn't fix it without me, without my help. They had ignored me for so long, and now they were trapped. My mother's broken voice came from the back of the room. She said they couldn't face it alone. They were desperate and needed me more than ever. She sounded so tiny, so fragile, that I almost believed her. But I recognized this old pattern, relying on me when it suited them. I asked, "What do you expect me to do? I'm building my own life now, and you're asking me to fix everything?" Dad's voice trembled as if sensing my growing anger. He said he lacked the resources to handle the situation. The bills were piling up, the house was deteriorating, and they couldn't solve it alone. How did they let it get this bad? "I'm not asking for a miracle," he added. "I just need you to understand our difficult situation. We don't know who else to turn to." My mind was in turmoil. Inside, I was screaming that I should be furious, that I should express it. That's exactly how I felt about all those years of looking after them, sacrificing everything for their happiness. I wanted to respond harshly, something that would penetrate the guilt they were trying to provoke in me, but something held me back. I could hear them breathing heavily, waiting for my decision. Finally, Mum spoke again, her voice full of grief. She begged me not to hate them. She expressed how sorry they were for everything. She said she felt ashamed of her behavior, of taking me for granted. She said they needed me, that they couldn't face it alone. I closed my eyes, feeling the weight of it all on me. I wanted to agree. I wanted to be the one they needed, but I also knew that it contradicted my current desires. I had worked extremely hard to get where I was. I had spent too much time living subservient to their needs. And I couldn't go back to that. Not now. "I can't just fix everything," I replied, my voice firm but cutting. "I have my own life now. I'm rebuilding everything. I can't keep putting myself aside for you." I heard Dad's broken voice and felt a pang of guilt, but I stood my ground, not this time. They needed to understand that I could no longer carry their responsibilities. "I have to go," I finally concluded. "I can't continue with this." I hung up before allowing them to add anything else. Am I wrong for this?